Frontier Desires by Evelyn Merrick. Colorado Territory, 1874. The sound of hoofbeats thundered across the rugged terrain as Isabella Montgomery urged her mare forward, her long chestnut hair streaming behind her like a banner in the wind. The cool morning air nipped at her cheeks, turning them a rosy pink that complemented her determined expression. She wasn't racing against anyone but herself and the memories that pursued her from back east. 3 weeks had passed since she'd arrived at her uncle's ranch in the Colorado Territory. Fleeing the suffocating constraints of Philadelphia society and a marriage proposal that had felt more like a business arrangement than a declaration of love. Here, among the towering mountains and sprawling valleys, Isabella sought the freedom she had craved her entire life. She slowed her horse to a trot as she approached the edge of her uncle's property. In the distance, the town of Silver Springs was coming to life, wisps of smoke rising from chimneys against the backdrop of an impossibly blue sky. Isabella had not ventured into town alone since her arrival, and the prospect both excited and unnerved her. "Come on, Penny," she murmured, patting the mare's neck. "Let's see what awaits us in Silver Springs." The main street bustled with morning activity. Shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, freight wagons delivered supplies, and cowboys ambled in and out of the general store. Isabella dismounted in front of the mercantile, tying Penny to the hitching post before smoothing the wrinkles from her riding skirt. She was reaching for the door when it swung open abruptly, and she collided with a solid wall of masculinity. Strong hands steadied her, preventing what would have been an ungraceful tumble into the dirt. "My apologies, ma'am," a deep voice rumbled above her. Isabella looked up into the most startling pair of blue eyes she had ever encountered. They belonged to a man with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. His features were rugged yet refined, like those of a gentleman who had chosen a life of physical labor. "The fault is mine," she replied, stepping back from his steadying grip. "I wasn't paying proper attention." The stranger's gaze swept over her, taking in her clearly Eastern attire and her unaccompanied state. "You must be Montgomery's niece. Word travels fast in small towns." "Yes, Isabella Montgomery." She extended her gloved hand, surprised when instead of merely shaking it, he lifted it briefly to his lips in a gesture more suited to an Eastern parlor than a Western street. "Nathan Thornton," he replied. "I own the Double T ranch that borders your uncle's property to the north." Recognition dawned on Isabella. "Ah, the neighbor my uncle mentioned. He speaks highly of your breeding program." A hint of a smile played at the corners of Nathan's mouth. "Does he now? That's high praise coming from James Montgomery." He gestured to the packages in his arms. "I'd ask you to join me for coffee at the hotel restaurant, but I'm afraid I have supplies to deliver to my foreman." "Another time, perhaps," Isabella replied, surprised by her own boldness. Nathan's eyes squinted at the corners. "I'll hold you to that, Miss Montgomery." With a tip of his hat, he strode to where his horse waited, leaving Isabella watching his departure with curious interest. Inside the mercantile, Mrs. Jenkins, a plump woman with kind eyes, greeted her warmly. "Miss Montgomery, what a delight to finally meet you. Your uncle has told us all about his accomplished niece from Philadelphia." Isabella returned the greeting while inwardly wondering exactly what her uncle had been sharing about her. She had come west to escape her reputation, not to have it follow her. As she selected the items on her uncle's list, Mrs. Jenkins kept up a steady stream of conversation. "Mr. Thornton is quite the catch, you know. Widowed these past 5 years. His wife died in childbirth along with the baby. Such a tragedy for a man so young." Isabella felt a pang of sympathy. That is truly unfortunate. "Indeed. He's built the Double T into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory since then. Works himself harder than any of his men. Some folks say he's trying to outrun his grief." Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer. "The ladies in town have been trying to catch his eye for years, but he's shown no interest. Focused on his ranch, that one." Isabella merely nodded, unwilling to participate in gossip about a man she had just met, regardless of how intriguing she found him. After completing her purchases, Isabella decided to explore the town before returning to the ranch. She wandered into the small bookshop, delighted to find a reasonably current selection despite their remote location. "Eastern literature is hard to come by out here," a familiar voice commented from behind her. Isabella turned to find Nathan Thornton watching her with amused interest. "Mr. Thornton, I thought you were returning to your ranch." "My foreman had some business in town, so I decided to wait." He nodded toward the volume in her hands. "Tennyson, you have refined tastes." You're familiar with his work? Isabella couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. 4 years at Harvard before I came west, he explained, his expression suggesting he enjoyed confounding her expectations. My father insisted on an education before I was allowed to pursue my own path, which led you here, to Silver Springs. By way of many other places, he acknowledged. And what brought you to our small corner of the territory, Miss Montgomery? Your uncle mentioned only that you needed a change of scenery. Isabella hesitated. Philadelphia society can be constraining for a woman with independent thoughts. Nathan's eyes reflected understanding. And here I thought you might be running from a broken heart. Not broken, she corrected. Simply never engaged in the first place. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Nathan's foreman, a weathered man who nodded respectfully to Isabella before turning to his boss. Everything's loaded, Mr. Thornton. We're ready when you are. Nathan turned back to Isabella. It appears I must take my leave, Miss Montgomery. Perhaps you'll allow me to show you some of the more scenic parts of the territory sometime? Areas tourists seldom see. I'd like that, Isabella replied, surprised by how much she meant it. Sunday afternoon? I could call at your uncle's ranch around 2. Sunday would be lovely. With another tip of his hat, Nathan departed, leaving Isabella with the distinct impression that her life in the West had just become considerably more interesting. James Montgomery observed his niece with barely concealed amusement as she changed her dress for the 3rd time. If I didn't know better, Isabella, I'd think you were nervous about this outing. Isabella smoothed the front of her blue riding dress, selected for both practicality and the way it brought out the hazel in her eyes. Don't be ridiculous, Uncle James. I'm merely trying to dress appropriately for an afternoon ride. Of course, he replied, his tone making it clear he didn't believe her for a moment. Nathan Thornton is a good man. One of the finest in these parts. He's also not known for taking ladies on riding tours of the countryside. Perhaps he's simply being neighborly, Isabella suggested, though she knew there had been something in Nathan's gaze that went beyond mere neighborly interest. Her uncle's knowing smile only widened. Indeed, very neighborly. The sound of approaching hoofbeats ended their conversation. Isabella moved to the window to see Nathan riding up on a magnificent black stallion, leading a gentle-looking Palomino mare. He brought a mount for you, Uncle James observed. Seems he didn't trust Penny for the terrain he has in mind. Isabella felt a flutter of anticipation as she made her way to the porch. Nathan dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. Good afternoon, Miss Montgomery, he called, removing his hat as he approached. He nodded to her uncle. James. Thornton, Uncle James returned with a nod. Have her back before dark. Nathan's expression remained serious, though Isabella detected a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. You have my word. Soon they were riding side by side across the open range, the rhythm of their horses' hooves creating a soothing melody against the earth. Nathan led her through meadows dotted with spring flowers and along ridges that offered spectacular views of the surrounding mountains. It's breathtaking, Isabella said as they paused at a particularly stunning overlook. Below them stretched a valley where a river looked like a silver ribbon through the landscape. This is why I stayed, Nathan said quietly. After Sarah died, I considered returning east. My father wanted me to take over the family shipping business in Boston. But this land, he gestured to the expansive view. It gets into your blood. Isabella studied his profile, struck by the quiet strength evident in his features. I understand. I've only been here a few weeks, but I already feel more alive than I ever did in Philadelphia. Nathan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. What were you seeking when you came west, Isabella? The use of her given name didn't escape her notice, but she chose not to comment on the familiarity. Freedom, I suppose. The liberty to determine my own path without society dictating my choices. And what path would you choose if the decision were entirely your own? Isabella considered the question seriously. I enjoy writing. I've kept journals since I was a girl, documenting observations about the world around me. In Philadelphia, such a pursuit was considered a charming hobby for a lady of good breeding, but nothing more. And here I've been writing about the landscape, the people, the rawness of life on the frontier. There's an honesty to existence here that I find compelling. She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. You must think me terribly naive. On the contrary, Nathan replied, his voice warm. I think you see clearer than most. The West isn't kind to pretension or falsehood. Nature has a way of stripping away artifice. They continued their ride, with Nathan pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area's history. As the afternoon progressed, Isabella found herself increasingly drawn to this complex man who seemed to bridge two worlds, educated and refined yet perfectly at home in this rugged environment. They stopped by a small lake nestled between hills, dismounting to let the horses drink. Nathan spread a blanket on a grassy spot and unpacked a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit. "Not quite the elaborate tea service you might be accustomed to," he said as he handed her a tin cup of water from his canteen. Isabella accepted the cup with a smile. "I find I prefer simplicity these days." As they ate, Nathan spoke of his ranch and his plans for expanding his breeding program. Isabella listened, captivated not just by his words but by the passion behind them. "You truly love it here?" she observed. Nathan nodded. "I came west thinking it would be a temporary adventure before returning to my real life in Boston. I never expected to find my true purpose here." "And did you? Find your purpose?" His gaze met hers, intense and searching. "Parts of it. Building something lasting. Working the land. But there are other aspects of a fulfilling life that I've put aside these past years." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken meaning. Isabella found herself unable to look away from the quiet intensity in his blue eyes. The moment was broken by a distant rumble of thunder. Nathan glanced at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering on the western horizon. "We should head back," he said, already packing up their simple picnic. "Spring storms can move in quickly here." They rode at a faster pace. But the storm was swifter still. They were still a mile from the Montgomery ranch when the skies opened. Rain poured down in sheets, accompanied by flashes of lightning and booming thunder. "There's a line shack just over that rise," Nathan shouted over the storm's roar, pointing to a small hill ahead. "We can wait it out there?" The small cabin was basic but sound, used by ranch hands during roundups. Nathan quickly unsaddled the horses and secured them in the lean-to attached to the cabin while Isabella wrung water from her sodden skirts. Inside, Nathan lit the lantern that hung from a hook in the ceiling and started a fire in the small stove. The single room held little more than a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot. "Not exactly the Plaza Hotel," Nathan commented wryly as he shrugged out of his wet coat. Isabella laughed, surprised at how little the rustic surroundings bothered her. "I doubt the plaza offers such dramatic entertainment," she replied, gesturing toward the window where lightning illuminated the landscape in brilliant flashes. Nathan handed her a rough wool blanket. "You should wrap up in this. Your dress is soaked through." Isabella accepted the blanket gratefully, turning her back to drape it around her shoulders over her wet clothing. When she turned back, she found Nathan watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "You're not what I expected, Isabella Montgomery," he said softly. "No? And what did you expect?" "When I heard James's Easter niece was coming to stay, I imagined a delicate hothouse flower who would wilt at the first sign of hardship." He moved closer, close enough that she could see droplets of rain still clinging to his eyelashes. "Instead, I find a woman who rides like she was born to it, who appreciates the beauty of this wild country, and who laughs in the face of a thunderstorm." Isabella felt her pulse quicken. "Perhaps I'm not who I thought I was either." Nathan's hand rose to brush a damp strand of hair from her face, his touch sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "And who are you discovering yourself to be, Isabella Montgomery?" "Someone braver than I knew," she whispered. "Someone who might be capable of taking risks I never considered before." The air between them crackled with tension that mirrored the lightning outside. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, Nathan lowered his head until his lips were a breath away from hers. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. Instead, Isabella closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started tentatively, but quickly deepened into something that left them both breathless. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you crashed into me outside the Mercantile." Isabella smiled, her hands resting against the solid warmth of his chest. "I didn't crash. You failed to look where you were going." His low laughter warmed her more effectively than the fire in the stove. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but neither of them paid it much attention anymore. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Isabella divided her time between helping her uncle with ranch business, writing in her journal, and increasingly frequent outings with Nathan. Each encounter deepened her understanding of this complex man who had unexpectedly captured her interest. She learned of his childhood in Boston as the son of a shipping magnate, his rebellion against his father's expectations, and his journey west in search of his own identity. He shared stories of his early struggles establishing the double T, the joy he had found in his brief marriage to Sarah, and the crushing grief that followed her death. In turn, Isabella told him of her stifling upbringing in Philadelphia society, her passion for writing that was dismissed as a frivolous hobby, and her flight west after rejecting a proposal from a man who saw her primarily as a suitable ornament for his political ambitions. As summer approached, their relationship blossomed like the wildflowers that carpeted the meadows. Nathan introduced her to the operations of his ranch, seeking her opinions and valuing her insights in a way no man had before. Isabella found herself imagining a future in this territory that had so quickly come to feel like home. But shadows loomed on the horizon. A letter arrived from Philadelphia, informing Isabella that her rejected suitor, William Harrington, had been appointed to a diplomatic post that would take him west. He intended to stop in Silver Springs to speak with her, claiming to have a proposal that would satisfy both their desires. "You don't owe him an audience," Nathan argued when Isabella informed him of the impending visit. They were riding the boundary between their properties, a habit that had become almost daily. "Perhaps not, but refusing to see him would only delay the inevitable. Better to make my position clear once and for all." She studied Nathan's tense profile. "Unless you object for other reasons." Nathan reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her fully. "What exactly are your feelings for this man, Isabella?" "William?" She shook her head. "I respect his intellect and ambition, but there was never any deeper attachment on my part. He wanted a politically advantageous marriage. I wanted—" She hesitated. "What did you want?" Nathan pressed, his blue eyes intense. "What I've found here," she admitted softly. "Freedom. Purpose. And someone who sees me as I truly am, not as society expects me to be." Nathan's expression softened. He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I had planned to wait until after the cattle drive to speak of this, but perhaps circumstances demand otherwise." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Isabella Montgomery. These past months have shown me that what I thought was contentment was merely existence. You've brought life back into my world." Joy surged through Isabella's heart. "I love you too, Nathan. More than I believed possible." "Then marry me," he said simply. "Be my partner in all things, the ranch, this life, whatever the future holds." Isabella's smile was radiant. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their kiss sealed the promise, sweet and full of hope for the future they would build together. William Harrington arrived in Silver Springs exactly as promised, impeccably dressed and exuding the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Isabella met him at the hotel restaurant, her composure strengthened by the sapphire ring now adorning her left hand, a family heirloom Nathan had presented to her the evening before. "You're looking remarkably well, Isabella," William commented, his appraising gaze noting the subtle changes in her appearance, the sun-kissed glow of her skin, the confident set of her shoulders. "Country living appears to agree with you." "It does," she confirmed. "I've found my place here, William." He nodded thoughtfully. "So your uncle's letter suggested. He mentioned you've been writing extensively about frontier life. That's partly why I'm here." He leaned forward. "I've been appointed as a special envoy to document conditions in the Western Territories for the State Department. I need a knowledgeable assistant with writing skills and social graces." Isabella blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a position?" "A partnership of sorts. Your observations combined with my political connections could result in publications that would bring much-needed attention to this region." His eyes gleamed with ambition. "Think of it, Isabella. Your writing reaching audiences in Washington, New York, even London, making a real difference in how the East views the West." The offer was tempting in ways she hadn't anticipated. Recognition for her writing, the chance to advocate for the land and people she had come to love. But she knew what accepting would mean. "It's a generous offer," she acknowledged, "but my future lies here, with the man I'm going to marry." William's expression tightened momentarily before he controlled it. "I see. May I inquire as to the identity of the fortunate gentleman?" "Nathan Thornton. He owns the neighboring ranch." Recognition flickered in William's eyes. "Thornton, of the Boston Thorntons? The shipping family?" Isabella nodded, not surprised that William would know of Nathan's background. "The same, though he's made his own way here. William sat back, studying her with new consideration. Well, you've managed to find both romance and a connection to Eastern society. Impressive. Nathan's connections were not a factor in my decision, Isabella stated firmly. Of course not, William replied, though his tone suggested skepticism. Still, it's convenient that your frontier adventure will eventually lead you back to civilization. Isabella felt a flare of irritation. You misunderstand. We have no intention of returning east. Our life is here. William raised an eyebrow. Is that what Thornton has told you? Interesting. He sipped his coffee. Did you know his father is gravely ill? The family business will need a new leader soon. As the only son, Nathan's obligations are clear. Isabella's stomach tightened with unease. Nathan had mentioned his father's declining health in passing but had never discussed any expectation of his return to Boston. Nathan has built something meaningful here, she said. He wouldn't abandon it. People return to their roots, Isabella, especially when duty calls. William's smile held a touch of pity. But perhaps I'm mistaken. I wish you both every happiness. The seed of doubt had been planted, however. That evening, Isabella found herself watching Nathan carefully as he discussed the upcoming cattle drive with her uncle. Was there a part of him that still belonged to Boston, to the world he had left behind? Later, as they walked in the garden behind her uncle's house, she broached the subject carefully. William mentioned your father's health is failing. Nathan's steps slowed. Yes, his heart is weak. The doctors don't expect him to see another winter. He also seemed certain you would return to Boston to take over the family business. Nathan stopped, turning to face her fully in the moonlight. Did he now? And did this suggestion trouble you? Isabella met his gaze directly. Only because you've never mentioned such a possibility to me. Nathan took her hands in his. Because no such possibility exists. I've made my position clear to my family. My younger brother has been running the business alongside my father for years. He's more than capable of taking full control. But as the eldest son, my obligations are to the life I've chosen, not the one that was planned for me. His voice was firm but gentle. My father and I made our peace with my decision long ago. William Harrington knows nothing of my family dynamics. Relief washed through Isabella. I didn't truly believe you would leave all this behind, but it was a skillful attempt to create doubt. Nathan finished for her. Harrington strikes me as a man who doesn't surrender easily. No, Isabella agreed. But he's fighting a battle that was decided the moment I left Philadelphia. She reached up to touch Nathan's face. My heart belongs here now, with you. His smile in the moonlight made her breath catch. As mine belongs to you. The wedding was held in early September, after the cattle drive and before the first snowfall would make travel difficult for guests. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with ranchers from miles around. Even Nathan's brother made the journey from Boston, bringing their father's blessing and a pair of silver candlesticks that had been in the Thornton family for generations. Isabella wore a gown of ivory silk that her aunt had sent from Philadelphia, though she'd modified the Eastern fashion to better suit her new Western sensibilities. As she walked toward Nathan, who waited for her beneath an arch of aspen boughs, she felt a sense of rightness that transcended the ceremony itself. This was her place. This was her future. Not as the demure society wife she'd been raised to become, but as a true partner to a man who valued her mind as much as her heart. As they spoke their vows before the gathered community, Isabella thought of the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the confining parlors of Philadelphia to the wide-open spaces of the Colorado Territory, from a woman seeking escape to one who had found her purpose. When Nathan took her hands in his and promised to cherish her all the days of his life, his blue eyes shining with a depth of emotion that needed no words, Isabella knew with perfect clarity that some journeys were meant to change more than just geography. They were meant to transform the very essence of who you were, revealing strengths you never knew you possessed and leading you to loves you never imagined possible. As Nathan's lips met hers, sealing their vows and their future, Isabella silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought her west, to this land, this life, and this man who had helped her discover that the greatest frontier of all was the one within her own heart. The celebrations continued long into the evening with music and dancing under stars that seemed to shine with particular brilliance. As Nathan led Isabella in a waltz, he leaned close to whisper in her ear. "Happy, Mrs. Thornton?" Isabella's smile illuminated her face. "More than I ever dreamed possible, Mr. Thornton." Around them, The community that had become their family celebrated not just their union but the spirit of the frontier itself, a place where people could reinvent themselves, where determination and courage mattered more than background or connections, and where love could flourish in the most unexpected circumstances. As the fiddles played and lanterns glowed against the gathering dusk, Isabella and Nathan danced, their movements in perfect harmony, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the western sky above.